Jane, we're seeing quite a lot of movements in equities. Last week, actually, it was relative calm for currencies. How do you explain this, dichotomy?
Well, of course, what we're seeing today certainly is risk-off sentiment, and we see this, in the equity markets, but we also see it in the yen. So this is the same trend. It's the markets moving towards the yen, and this is interesting, if you like, that they haven't moved to the dollar, because I think if we go back really since February, what we've seen is this big sell-off in emerging markets, as we've just been hearing about. But we lost that risk-on, risk-off theme that has been very dominant since the global financial crisis, because what we saw is emerging markets equities sell off, but US equities really do quite well this year, until, of course, very recently. And we've seen this correction. That has meant that rather than going to the dollar, there's been safe haven funds going into the more traditional counterparties, which, of course, are the yen and the Swiss franc. Now, whether or not that continues, I think very much depends on US equities.
So, Jane, are you telling me that actually the dollar is no longer a haven?
Well, you see, I suppose if we want to look at the really big picture, I would always argue whether or not the dollar really is a proper safe haven. After all, it's got current account deficit there in the US, there's a budget deficit as well. But this year, it certainly has been the haven of choice, because you've had this strong US growth story. And I think the question now is whether or not that strong US growth story has ended, or whether or not what we've just seen is just a little correction in a bull market. And that's why I think this week's results from the stock sector will be really quite important, because they were good on Friday. If they continue to be good, it's going to be quite difficult to keep selling US stocks, and that would mean more likely that what we've seen in the last few days is just a blip in a bull run. So if we carry on seeing US stocks do well over, say, the next month or two, the dollar probably will carry on doing well as well.